There is the Mets. There's that stadium. I went to a couple baseball games there. You have the Brooklyn Bridge, which is beautiful. You have the Statue of Liberty. Got to visit those places. You have this place in Brooklyn, I think, or it's in Queens. It's called Graffiti Park, where it's a block of graffiti where you have to pay to do the graffiti. So it's really high quality graffiti. You know, it's not like trashy graffiti. So you can go and they're changing it all the time, but it's professional graffiti artists. So it's really cool. It's in East New York, I think, close to East New York. There were 2 hurricanes. I left right before the big one, Sandy. But the summers are really, really hot and really, really humid. And if you're in the city, they pile up garbage. So it just smells horrible. But it smells like something's dead everywhere you go. And if you serve in a Chinese area, it smells like fish, cooked fish everywhere. So you have the humidity, and it can get up to 105 with humidity. And then in this winter, you're going to have really, really cold snowstorms. I had a weird winter where it wasn't cold, but normally you need to have supplies for really, really cold and really, really hot. Yeah, it's extreme. Fall is beautiful. New Yorkers are not afraid of anybody, and they're not afraid of life. You can be whoever you want to be in New York. You can dress however you want to dress. Nobody thinks anything different of you. Nobody judges you because people are so unique and so themselves. So there's just a confidence about New Yorkers that they are happy with not necessarily happy with them, but they're comfortable where they are. And so that's the great thing about New York is that you don't feel weird as a missionary because there's tons of abnormal people everywhere, so it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if you say a public prayer because you have street preachers everywhere. So the great thing about New York is that everyone has problems, and it's just we're here together in this world. They're very hard workers. Most of the people, they're all immigrants in Queens and Brooklyn, mostly. And so they come here, and generally they work for very little pay, and they'll work up to 60 hours in a week. And they live in tiny little apartments, and they send most of their money back home to their families. So that's what's heartbreaking is you see families split apart, but you also see a great love for the family, that even though you find mostly broken families, everybody has a hope that their family will be together. And so that's one thing that when you talk to people and you emphasize the family, that's something that people really cling to because it's something that they're trying to hold on to most of the time. Something about Queens. Queens is probably the most culturally diverse place in the world. And I served most of my time, all but 2 transfers in Queens. And so whenever you get transfer calls, you basically get called to a different country. And so when I first went, I went to a place called Jamaica, Queens, which was a kind of rougher area, but it was mostly Islander, Jamaican, Dominican, Black, like Puerto Rican. And so I was probably the only blonde, and the first time ever being the minority ever, walking down the streets, and it was crowded, and there's tons of people, and I'm from Idaho Falls, so it's completely different. And so it was a real shocker to me, but it was amazing, and I loved it, and I loved the energy, and I loved the people. And I found that most people are actually very friendly people. When you think of New York, you think people won't want to talk to you. They think that you're really strict and everything, but that's not true at all because in Queens, everybody's from everywhere else. They're from a different country. And so they get so excited when somebody is friendly because that reminds them of their country because nobody talks to each other. And so if you sit down with someone on the bus, they're immediately going to talk to you. They're going to open up. I mean, some people are not. Like when you go to Manhattan, it's a little bit colder. But in Queens and Brooklyn, you find that there are tons of very friendly, very open people that will even let you into the door when you knock on it. Well, I don't think you have to worry about safety if you follow the mission rules. You just are in home. You're at your house by 9:30. There's some areas where we had to be home strict to curfew. In some areas we felt a little safer, but generally they gave us a pepper spray for a Christmas present, but I've never felt threatened. There was one time, you just listen to the Holy Ghost, and this happens anywhere. I was walking down the street and I literally felt something stop me that I couldn't go to the next block. And so we had to move around and go somewhere else because you just listen to the Spirit and it will protect you. But New York, they just don't put sisters, your mission president won't ever put sisters where it's too dangerous, and they'll pull you out. There was only a couple incidences of problems during my whole mission, so it wasn't bad at all. It wasn't like South America where my brother was, had the gun put on him. There was nobody that had a gun pulled on them while I was there that I ever heard about in New York. My companion and I were walking down the street, and we were just talking about how dirty New York was. and just trash. You just have trash on the sides of the street, and some people just spend their whole lives cleaning up New York. And then at that very moment we were talking about it, we see this piece of bread come flying out of an apartment from like the 4th floor down onto the street. And we're like, what on earth? So we look up, and there's this man that pokes his head out the window and shouts at us, like, do you want to hear some bird calls? And then he starts doing all of these crazy sounds. And we just stare at him for a minute and look at the bread. And then we just keep walking like, did that really just happen? I just felt bad for the guy that there's only pigeons in New York. There's really nothing else. So yeah, feeding the pigeons. And the same block, there was this lady who would pour bird feed on all the sidewalks. And there was this old man that was trying to catch her the whole time. And so he would come up to us and be like, are you the ones that keep putting the bird feed on the sidewalk? And I said, nope. And then we would see her dumping the bird seed, saying, don't tell anybody I'm doing the bird seed. So there's just crazy old people that are so fun. Like they're cat lady and dog lady, or a cat man, they would pour tons of milk everywhere so that all of these cats would just swarm, and you just have tons of, it's not helping the problem at all. But yeah, that's the animal life that you get to look forward to, is cockroaches, rats, and cats. It's fun. Pigeons. Yeah. So I lived in a place called Jamaica, Queens, right? And there was a Jamaica Avenue, which is really dirty. And as a sister, you just get catcalled a lot. And so my companion was on the phone talking to the family as we were walking home from appointments that night. And we were getting catcalled, like, just by guys as we were passing. And my companion was like, I should have maced him. And then the next guy walks by, and she's like, I really should have maced him too. And so then the third guy walks and like says something to her, but she doesn't recognize it because she's on the phone. And so she takes the mace and puts it really close to his face. And she's like, I will mace you. And then he walked away like really confused, and he turned back and was like, your backpack's open. And I was laughing so hard. It was probably one of my favorite experiences on a mission. So that's a funny one. I was really big on music in New York, and we put on this huge fireside about coming to Christ. And we invited the whole Queens stake, and it was packed all the way through. And I just remember the amount of work that I did and the amount of hours that I had, I just literally felt like the Holy Ghost was telling me, this is the song, this is what you need to say, and this is what everything, just put it together. It was amazing that I was able to do so much with so little time, and that we had so much talent to work with in that particular area. And I remember seeing people cry and having so many people's lives touched. And there were people that would never have come into the church, that were really heavy into their religion, that suddenly opened up to Mormons. And they were said, okay, well, invite the missionaries anytime now, when before they said, don't invite the missionaries at all. So music was just a powerful thing. And I remember the stake patriarch talking. We had him do the spokes. He was a spokesperson for the whole program. And his daughter was doing the translation. And he was talking about Christ, and there was a special spirit that you could feel between father and daughter when he was talking about his testimony of Jesus Christ, about inviting people to come home, that through the music and through his testimony and through the scriptures, it just created such a special experience that I'll never forget. All right, so Christmas Day, or a couple days before Christmas, the elders had especially wrapped all of these Book of Mormons and DVDs and pamphlets, and they gave us a huge stack of them a couple days before Christmas just to give to people. And I just didn't want to give this package to anybody, but at the same time, you're carrying your backpack, you're carrying your scriptures, you're carrying so much stuff, so I was just thinking, how am I going to get rid of all of these Book of Mormons? And so then we were walking down on the street, and there was a man who was on the porch. We had just gotten, well, one of our appointments fell through. They weren't there at the door. That happens a lot as a missionary. And he was there smoking, waiting for the taxi, and I decided to go up and talk to him. And I just was excited about the Book of Mormon. I told him about this, about visiting him, and he was like, oh, yeah, come over anytime. And then I gave him the package, and he was just so touched that he got a Christmas present from a complete stranger. So then immediately he went into the taxi cab. We literally had 5 minutes window with even seeing him. It was just clear that God was arranging the whole thing. And so then we come back the next week, and he has read 15 chapters in the Book of Mormon. He has watched the video. He has gone on to Mormon.org and researched all of our beliefs and everything, and had a million questions. And granted, he was a difficult investigator because he had questions about everything, and he wanted to know that Joseph Smith was a prophet. He was from Paraguay. And so he was very careful about getting baptized, but when he did get baptized, he realized the covenant that he was making. And it was definitely one of the best experiences of my life, was listening to the Spirit and talking to literally everybody, even if it's 5 minutes before you have to go home. I'm from Idaho Falls, in Spanish Fork, Utah. Small, right? And not a lot of diversity. And I was shy growing up. And so talking to complete strangers is really hard, and it's really intimidating for me. And when I went to New York, we did these things called street sweeps. I was in, like I said, Jamaica, Queens, and tons of people everywhere. We set up a table, and we give out free DVDs. We have people sign up for free DVDs and Book of Mormons and Bibles. And you talk to everybody in the streets. Everybody. You can talk to 100 people in 30 minutes, easily. And I just remember thinking to myself, because at first I just stood there with my little pamphlet, petrified. Like, I can't talk to these people. They're walking a million miles per hour. They don't want to be stopped. They don't want to hear what some Idaho girl has to say. And it changed. And I just said, no respecter of persons, because Christ was no respecter of persons. And I went and talked to the first person that I laid eyes on every time. And I went up to them and I would talk to them. And pretty soon people would say, my wife just died, and I've been looking for hope. Maybe this is what I'm looking for. Or, really, there's a Book of Mormon that was written here? Or, you're telling me that my family, that we can have a stronger life through Christ? How's that possible? And so pretty soon you find people that are lost, that are searching, and that are crying out for help, even though they might be walking fast. You might get rejected a million times, but it's those few that are like, thank you for stopping me, I need to talk to you, that suddenly opens up a world to you. And so for me, I was able to talk to everybody. I was able to say the most unlikely people can be the ones that are the most interested in it, you know? And I literally now can talk to anybody. And that's a really big gift that I got. When I first opened my call and I saw New York, I just realized that the church is true. I planned on living in New York my whole life. And when I saw Spanish speaking, I wanted to speak Spanish my whole life. And so I thought it was a perfect calling. And my sister-in-law is actually from New York, and she is from Mexico as well. So her family was still living in New York. And I just looked at the call and I looked at her and I said, I'm going for your family. And so then I was in sacrament meeting one day, and I thought her family was in Brooklyn, but I was in Queens, on the border of Brooklyn, and I see the 17-year-old girl in jeans, so immediately you think, okay, well, I've got to go talk to them because potential, you know. And I went up to her, and immediately she said, oh, you're Adam's sister. And I said, what? She's like, you look just like Adam. And it turns out it was my sister-in-law's niece who was baptized Catholic. And that was her first time to church, and she just moved in with her grandpa, who happened to be in the Lord, which was my sister-in-law's father. And about a month and a half later, she got baptized on my birthday. And it was like, that day we taught her a lesson, and she was first really cold. And then we taught the plan of salvation to another girl who was getting baptized. And she just looked at it and looked at us and said, I believe all of this. This gives me hope in life. And it was amazing to see the transformation of her. The Book of Mormon is an amazing book that every single page is about Jesus Christ. And when you read it, you will feel a light come into your life that you have never felt before. And if you read it every day, your days will be brighter. You'll be able to do more because the whole book is geared to pointing you towards Jesus Christ. And it may be hard to understand at times, and you might get frustrated, but the Book of Mormon's purpose is to point you to Christ. And whenever I am feeling like I don't know what to do, like I'm looking for answers, I can read in the Book of Mormon, and literally it is as though God is talking to me. Because it's the words of the Lord. It's the words of God. And it's real people and real prophets, because the Bible was written by prophets, right? And when we read those words in the Bible, they're amazing and they help us and they talk about Christ. And these prophets, you think about Moses and Noah, and their whole purpose was to bring us to Christ. And so what this is to me is a testimony that God didn't just love the people in the Middle East. He loved the people all over the world. And here's another record of people in the Americas. That God isn't just reaching out to one people, He's reaching out to everybody. And He's reaching out constantly to us. And so I can testify that the Book of Mormon, you read it every day, light will come and clarity with your life. And you will receive so many more blessings that you won't even be able to comprehend. I've seen it heal homes. I've seen it heal hearts. And it's healed mine multiple times. It's something that I read every day, not because it's a requirement, but because I need that light in my life. We were in Brooklyn, and in Brooklyn it's this place called Midwood. I can't believe I forgot that. Okay, Midwood. And it's a very Hasidic Jewish community where you are literally surrounded by a bunch of Jewish people and Jewish synagogues. And, you know, if you just look it up online, you'll just see that it's just extremely Jewish. People will talk to you in Hebrew. They have rabbis talking, and it's really cool. And so we were walking down the street, and we saw all of these Jewish children playing in the street, and they all just got quiet as we walked along. And then suddenly my companion said, "Shalom." And suddenly we just got all these kids shouting at us, "Shalom, shalom." shalom, shalom, as we were walking down the streets and like following us. It was a really cool experience, actually. It was fun. We had a really difficult teenage boy that we were teaching that had been an investigator for 5 years. And he just was really defiant towards us. He went to church every Sunday, but we were trying to get him baptized. And he just pretended like he didn't care about anything. So it was like we were trying to break through his shell. Because we knew he wanted to be baptized. And we knew that he had a testimony. But trying to get him to do anything was pulling teeth. And so we used to text him every night, kind of slang words, to try to get him to pray. Like, hey, Jared, why don't you give your Heavenly Father a what's up tonight? And he just really roll his eyes because we would try to be all ghetto with him. And he's like, you guys cannot be ghetto at all. And so that was the great thing about the youth, is that you can joke around with them because they try to be all tough and mean. And so as soon as you like try giving it back to them, they laugh. But it's a way to get into their hearts. Well, rejection is just a part of missionary work. If you think that people are just going to open the door and be like, yeah, come in. This is what we're waiting for. We've been praying that you'll come in. Never had that happen to me. But what I did have were people that were first really hostile that slowly opened up. And so my suggestion, or my thing is, try to love them from the minute that you speak to them and talk to them as though you love them, and it will break down walls. So I remember this one lady that I sat next to, and I started asking about her, smiling, and she just looked at me and said, why are you talking to me? And I was like, oh, I just was interested in your life. She's like, I don't want to tell you about my life. Who are you? Who are you to think that you're... And she just went off on me. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm from Idaho, and we just talk to each other. So, and she immediately, you see her melt. Because I was playing I'm a naive person that's in New York card, which is a great card to play. And then she's like, oh, honey, this is New York. People don't talk to each other in New York. And then she just went off on all of her life story to me, and she just wanted to tell me all about it. She accepted the card. And so it went from a very hostile environment to a very, oh, you actually just care about me, and you don't have an ulterior motive. And so I think if you are interested in convincing people that the church is true, you're going to fail. You might get some converts that fall away, but that's not the way to do it. You're there to invite people to come to Christ. And when you see them and you want to offer that to them, that they can have hope and that they can have light in their life. And it's not a baptism. It's not a number. It's not like, well, I got three new investigators today. It's I brought life to someone, and sometimes that is only a sincere smile that you can give, and you get rejected the rest of the day. You just realize this is God's work and that you are trying to become like Christ. So the more Christ-like that you can be, and the more Christ-like love that you have towards everybody, the more people are going to be drawn to you, and the more you're going to enjoy and love your mission, and it will be so much more to you. Well, the main overall theme of my mission for me was the first principle that you always teach people, which is God is your loving Heavenly Father. And that's always what you start with. And if you don't start with that, you don't have a foundation, because Satan tries so hard to break that foundation. He doesn't want people praying to him. Like, Satan doesn't want people praying to God. He doesn't want people to understand who God is. People think that God is this mystic character. And so I remember teaching this 12-year-old girl who really has my heart in every way. I loved her so much. And she didn't feel like God loved her at all. And she thought that God hated her for the bad things that she had done. In New York, people grow up very fast. And they have hard lives. Really hard lives. And she had one that just she had a story that breaks your heart. And I remember talking to her and feeling the Spirit so strong that God loved her. And I just remember getting emotional when I told her that God loved her, and it was as though the room was encircled with so much love that I didn't know what to do with. And the next time we went over, she said that she started crying when she was praying. And we're like, what do you mean you started crying? Because she was praying by herself. And she said, I feel like God loves me. And it's the first time I've ever felt that before. And it just enveloped everything. And you watch that carry her through her trials versus enduring her trials. The love suddenly became part of her life. And that, it was probably one of the most tender experiences of my mission. I know that God is our loving Heavenly Father, that we are literally His children, and that He wants us to be happy, and that even though life is hard and we have so many questions about why things are the way that they are, and sometimes when we pray we feel like there's no one listening, I know that there is someone listening, and that God cares, and He cares about the details in our lives, and that He wants to give us everything to be happy. And that might not be what we think would make us happy, but we are His children, and being His children means that we are important to Him, and we're not just a speck on the earth that nobody cares about, and that our opinions don't matter, and that what does it matter if I die today or I die tomorrow? I'm just one of the billions of people on the earth. To God, you are everything, and He is your Father, and you can talk to Him as though you were His child, because you are. And I know I have felt His love, and in the church we describe it as being sweet fruit, and that's what it is for me. It's the most sweet and the most tender experiences. And I remember praying and saying for the first time, Heavenly Father, can I feel your love? And I felt something strong and powerful. And I know that if you seek for God's love, to know if He is there and if He hears you, He will always answer that prayer. Always. And I know that Jesus Christ is a person who lived and died, was resurrected, and that is here to save us, and that He is God's Son. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Sometimes the mission is not, your mission is towards your companions, and you form close relationships. And if you go in thinking that God has put you together, that will help with your companions in realizing that you have to mold together. You can't be rigid. And one of my companions lost her father while she was on the mission. And a lot of the time, it was just learning how to be compassionate to her and to mourn with her and to walk through life with her. And so I still contact all of my companions, and I'm close to all of them. Like, it is possible to have a mission where you love all your companions. I mean, it's easy for me to say, I guess, because I had wonderful companions, but I went into it, every single one of them, thinking, this is going to be my best transfer. This is going to be my best area. This is going to be my favorite companion. And it happened every time. And that's what happened was, in that moment, it was my favorite companion. And granted, there were hard times, but that's something that I would recommend for everybody just throughout life is, this is the best month, this is the best year, and this is my favorite time of year. Instead of reflecting and saying, oh, that area was so much easier, it's good to enjoy even the hard times and enjoy them for being hard. So New York South is the best mission call you could ever get, because when you go to New York, you're not going in the States. You feel like you're in a different country all the time. You're in several different countries. The world comes to you when you're in New York, and you get to see the world all in one place. And so you will have experiences there that are unlike anywhere else in the world. New York is one of the most unique places you could ever go and could ever experience, just because of so much diversity and just experiences that you're going to have there. You're going to find people that you never thought you were going to meet. You're going to meet people from countries that you've never even heard of. And you're going to have experiences that are so crazy and so bizarre, because the people of New York are very, very unique, crazy people, and you love them. And my mission is everything to me. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about the people that I miss. My heart aches to go back there, and you're going to have that same aching when you have to leave. And so making every moment count, of course, is vital, and people will tell you that all the time. But really, it's making everything count is something that's so important to me, because I look back on it and I feel good about my mission, and I feel excited, and I reflect often about my memories back there, and I still keep in contact with people. One thing that I would suggest, if I could go back again, I wouldn't be as afraid of things. I would be more bold. When they say talk to everybody, talk to everybody. And when they say open your mouth, open your mouth. And when you feel prompted to bear your testimony about the Book of Mormon, bear your testimony about the Book of Mormon. And don't be afraid, because God is really with you, and He'll lead you, He'll guide you. And really, there's not a place on earth that's like it. It's like you literally are watching the gathering of Israel, because you are watching people gather to New York from all over. And so I felt like God's children were coming to one place here. And when they come and meet the church here, a lot of them say, that's why I came to New York, is to find the church.
Flying into New York, I went with a group of missionaries. We had about 13, and there were a lot of Spanish missionaries, a few English, and then there were 3 of us that were going Chinese speaking. And we were picked up at the airport, and right after being picked up, the mission president and the assistants took us to Jamaica, Queens, which is one of the most diverse places. Queens is the most diverse county or area in the United States. It has the most languages spoken of any area, at least that's what's reported online, and that's what everyone talks about in our mission. And so we went to Jamaica, and we were the only white people on the street. And having come from Utah, that was a big difference. But it was so incredible just to jump into the New York culture and meet people from all over the Caribbean, all over Africa. In that area, there were a lot of Indians and people from just all sorts of countries, and Hispanics. Except I was a little worried because there weren't any Chinese people. And I was thinking, I want to speak Chinese, but I couldn't on that first day. But that was an incredible experience just to jump in, and they do that for every incoming group. So every group, every missionary on their first day will get to go to Jamaica, Queens and hand out flyers and Mormon.org cards. We call it a street sweep, and get contact information and really just jump into the missionary work on day 1. That's one of my favorite aspects about just that opening experience in the New York South Mission. And then following that, we go to the mission president's home and have an excellent dinner. And the next day is the transfer meeting, where you meet your trainer, which is so fun. And my trainer was from Hong Kong, Elder Tsung, but he goes by T-Sang because no one can pronounce his name properly. And he spoke primarily Cantonese. And a funny experience that happened when we were leaving the transfer meeting, there was a member there who came to help pick up the missionaries' luggage to take it to their apartments. And I was called to Brooklyn, Dyker Heights, Brooklyn. There's a Chinatown down there. They started speaking, he and this member, and they started speaking in what I thought was Mandarin, but I didn't understand it at all. And they were just going back and forth and pointing at things, and I was like, I thought I knew how to say car. I thought I knew this word, but I could not follow anything that they were saying, and I was really worried. It's like, this is not the language I learned in the MTC. But then I just kind of cut them off and said, what are you speaking? This isn't Mandarin, is it? And they're like, oh, it's Cantonese. I was like, oh gosh, thank goodness. So that was a funny experience right off the bat. But from there, everything worked out, and we went to our first area, taught a lesson right away. It was incredible with a member present, and I was really blessed to have a good trainer who just showed me how missionary work should be done from day one. And so it's fun. New York's a little overwhelming. At times it's a big city, as is expected, and especially Brooklyn. It's just that concrete jungle that they talk about. You just have 3-4-story buildings lining each street as far as the eye can see, and there's a few parks scattered here and there. But at first I felt a little shut in, but within a week and a half I just loved it and had a blast there. I formally served in only Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. So there are 2 Chinatowns in our mission. There's one in Brooklyn in the Dyker Heights area, and there's one in Flushing, Queens, which is up in northern Queens. And they have so many Chinese people. It's crazy. I get asked all the time if we had to search for Chinese people, if it was all referral based, but I would walk outside my apartment in the morning and just be flooded with Chinese people. So finding them was not a problem at all, and speaking Chinese wasn't an issue at all either. And then when I was English speaking, I did that for 8 months, and I served in Staten Island for 6 months and Bell Harbor for 3, which is in southern Queens. And then informally, I had a chance to go all over Long Island to visit different zones and districts, and also I got to go to Bermuda for a few days, which was a really cool experience. So I touched down on each area in the mission, but I guess formally just served in those 3 boroughs. I love the history of the New York South Mission because it is one of the oldest missions in the world. And I believe one of the first missionaries I went there was Parley Pratt. And our mission covers Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island, Staten Island, and Bermuda, the island nation of Bermuda. And that one's interesting. Everyone's eyes drop with that. But I believe that's because JFK is located in our mission, and it has one of the most convenient flights to Bermuda. And historically, I think it used to be one of the only flights. And then once more airports started going there, they still just kept it in our mission boundaries. So English missionaries all have a chance to go to Bermuda, which is a lot of fun. It's a fun place. And we speak 7 languages, 6 of them officially, and then 1 kind of informally is spoken. It's English, American Sign Language, French Creole, Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, Korean, and then Cantonese is kind of the informally spoken one. Because a lot of the Chinese missionaries already know Cantonese, so they teach in Cantonese when they come. And so the whole time you're on islands, you won't touch down on the mainland United States in your 2 years. Although we did get permission to go to a ward activity in New Jersey once, which kind of changed that up for me. But most missionaries won't get to do that. And the New York North Mission, I guess that's a distinction that a lot of people kind of get mixed up. The North Mission covers 2 of the 5 boroughs. They have Manhattan and the Bronx. And our mission covers 3 of the boroughs, which is Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. And with those 3 boroughs and Long Island, we have about 9 million people in our mission, probably making it one of the most populated missions in the world. And so all the missionaries in the city, which is considered mostly Queens and Brooklyn, and then Staten Island's kind of a little more residential city area, but they'll all be taking the buses and trains the whole time or walking. And then everyone on Long Island and on Staten Island drive cars. And so it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of diversity. It shocked me because I thought I'd be in the city the whole time, but I had opportunities later on in my mission to go to different areas further out on Long Island. And just if you go an hour outside of the city, you find yourself in farm country. And there are some areas in our mission that just like you reach the end of the freeway and there's a farming equipment store right there on the highway. And then there's just, it was really fascinating to see that there's horse pastures and cattle ranches and just everything you could think of, nice beaches. And then you also have the completely urban areas. So I feel like it's one of the most diverse missions, plus as a tropical island. So it's an incredible experience being in the New York South mission. Staten Island, I think, is kind of the forgotten borough of New York. A lot of people, because they hear there's 5, so they're thinking Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, the Bronx, and they're like, what's the 5th one? And Staten Island. So don't forget Staten Island. I love it there. And Staten Island has about 500,000 people on it. And if it were an independent city, then it would actually be the 2nd largest city in New York, the state of New York. And it's really fascinating because Staten Island is much closer to New Jersey than it is New York City. There is one bridge that connects it to Brooklyn, the Verrazano Bridge, which is the largest suspension bridge east of the Mississippi River. And it's beautiful. I loved crossing the Verrazano Bridge. It was a lot of fun to be able to live on that island and have that chance. And then the other way that it's connected to Manhattan is by a ferry, a free ferry. And if you ever go on vacation, actually the Staten Island ferry is probably one of the best deals you could get for a good experience as a tourist. So that's kind of how it's connected to the city. But then on the east or the west side of Staten Island, you have New Jersey, which is so close that it has 3 bridges connecting it. And at some places you feel like you could just like stand on the bank of Staten Island and jump over to New Jersey. But the New York has a lot of culture and a lot of stories that contributed to its development. The legend with Staten Island is that they had a competition between New Jersey and New York, and each had a boat. And the competition was whoever could sail around Staten Island first would get Staten Island. And of course, New York won. And so that's why Staten Island is now part of New York City, which is pretty interesting. And I'm grateful for that because I'm glad I got to serve there. The Staten Island is quite big. It takes about an hour 15 minutes to drive from the north end to the south end. And the north part is much more urbanized, north of the freeway, and they're doing a lot to actually develop it. And so it's a really up-and-coming area in New York City. And then if you go south of the freeway, though, you just have mostly houses. And if you go even further towards the southern tip, I mean, people have huge lots. They're on half-acre, full-acre, even just bigger, like farming type of areas. And so it's really cool to be kind of in a place where you can capture that feeling of the city and the diversity of that, but then also just be in almost a Utah-like community. And so it's a really special place. On Staten Island, they have 2 units. They have an English ward and a Spanish ward. And so I got to serve in the English ward there. And that's Staten Island. Our whole mission is extremely diverse, but Brooklyn is such an incredible place to serve because you can be in one area or even on one street. So, for example, I served in the Dyker Heights Chinese area, but really the Chinatown was just 8th Avenue and then kind of 7th and 6th Avenues. But if you walk from 8th Avenue to 5th Avenue, you just completely hop continents and you're suddenly in South America. And so 5th Avenue is all Spanish speaking. All the storefronts are in Spanish. And then you go to 8th Avenue, all the storefronts are in Chinese. There are Chinese people walking everywhere. You go to 11th Avenue and suddenly everything is in Hebrew. And there are lots of Jewish people. And you just keep hopping. And about every 3 avenues, you're in a different country. And I loved that. So just eating at different places, getting to know different cultures was so fun. I made it a really unique experience. And Brooklyn is very densely populated. There's buildings covering the whole of Brooklyn. There are some really nice parks, which are a lot of fun to go to on P days. And there's definitely chances to get out into the open. But for the most part, you're just in the city. And every corner has some different kind of restaurant. There's a laundromat on every corner. It's almost every 3 blocks has its own like community, because there are so many people in each area. And so I served in the southern part of Brooklyn, which is mostly just has that Chinatown. And then also, if you go over to the next neighborhood, there's a lot of Scandinavians and Eastern Europeans, which is also really cool. And then if you go to more northern Brooklyn, it's kind of more of what you see in the movies. A lot of movies were filmed in Bushwick, like Spider-Man. And there's downtown Brooklyn, which is where you get more of the high rises and the Brooklyn Bridge and a lot of other attractions that you'll see or hear about. And so that was a lot of fun to be able to go to all these different areas and see such diversity and such strong culture. And so I don't know, it's so special because of that. So Brooklyn is what you hear about. It's a pretty rough place at times, but also New York has been cleaned up so much, and it is a great place to live. Now there are incredible families, and the church is definitely developing because it's a pretty transient area. And so it's tough to get a strong foundation, but at the same time, there are a lot of incredible people there who really hold it together. So I served in the same area for a year. Actually 364 days, so I was shy by 1 day. And it was Flushing, Queens. That's the big Chinatown in Queens, and that is one of the biggest Asian populations outside of Asia. And I think the Manhattan Chinatown actually has more Chinese people, but as a whole, Flushing has the most Asians because there's a big Korean population also. And so that was fun to just serve in that area and to serve there so long for 9 transfers. And so Queens has a special place in my heart. But Queens is similar to Brooklyn in its diversity, but it's much bigger and the communities are a lot more developed. So that's what I thought was really fascinating about Queens is Flushing isn't just an avenue, it's a whole area filled with Chinese people. And if you go to the outskirts, it's covered with Korean people, and if you go even beyond that, it's all like Greek, and you get some Irish, a lot of Irish Catholics out there, and just some more Europeans. And so it's fascinating too, because 20 years ago, all of Flushing was Caucasian and European. And then about 15 years ago, the Koreans moved in, and then 10 years ago, the Chinese moved in. So you can see all throughout Queens in all the communities, that's how it is you have like Chinese and then like on the outskirts, because you can see that they kind of push out the Koreans, and then all the Europeans are on the outskirts of the Koreans, and you just see like these ripples all around Queens. And so Flushing is all Asian. You go across Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, and in Corona, it's all Mexican. Completely just thousands, tens of thousands of Mexicans, and just these little stores and restaurants, and everything is in Spanish. And then you go to Jamaica, and it's all African and Caribbean, and it's incredible. And they're huge communities of people who just gather from these regions around the world. And so I love that aspect of Queens. And it's really friendly, family friendly. If I lived in New York City with my family, I'd probably live in Queens. I feel like there are some incredible communities there, and there are a lot of really incredible things happening with the work in Queens. They just created a new stake over there. There used to be only 3 stakes in our mission. I guess this is a different topic, but there used to be 3 stakes in our mission: the Brooklyn, the Queens stake, and then the Plainview stake. And then they just were able to divide the Queens stake, and by taking a part of and there's also a district. So they turned the Limbrook district into a stake, and that takes apart half of Queens and a little bit of Long Island. And then there's still the Woodside stake, which is kind of the new Queens stake. So there are a lot of good things happening there. Bermuda is exactly what you picture. I mean, if you look into any magazine that shows a beautiful beach with clear turquoise water and luscious palm trees, that's Bermuda. So it's about as ideal a place that you could be. And it's a really religious island. There is a church on every corner in Bermuda, and the people are very humble and very religious, and they love God. And so it's interesting to be a missionary there because everyone's very open to hearing the gospel, but a lot of times they're already committed to another church. But at the same time, the Lord really, he makes things work. And so Bermuda's really up and coming. The branch there is growing and probably going to split by the end of the year, which is very exciting. So they'll have 2 branches on the island of Bermuda, hopefully within the next year at least. And the culture, so I thought of tourism when I go to Bermuda, but actually their top 2 industries are banking and reinsurance. So there's a lot of wealthy bankers there that's where the Bermuda shorts come in. All of them are wearing their short shorts with the really long socks and their dress shoes and everything. It's really fascinating. But Bermuda is a very fun place. And the missionaries who serve there full time are English missionaries. They'll serve there 4 transfers. There are 2 sisters, 1 companionship of sisters and 1 companionship of elders, and a senior couple that serve on Bermuda. And they're the lucky ones that everyone wants to be. But it's a really very cool place to serve, and it is nothing like the city. So it feels like they go on a vacation, especially those who go during winter time, because winter months in New York are freezing, but Bermuda's pretty warm throughout the winter. So it's fun to have it in the mission. So a lot of times as a missionary serves stateside, speaking a foreign language, I get asked all the time, did you get to learn Chinese? Are you worried about your Chinese? Did you really feel like you were part of the culture? And every time I just look them right in the eye and say, yes. And I feel like I had as authentic of a Chinese experience as anyone who went to Taiwan, or I guess that's really the only option, or Hong Kong, as far as Chinese speaking goes. And one of the best parts about serving stateside Chinese speaking, and I think this is the same for all stateside missionaries, even the English speaking ones, is I didn't only learn about the Hong Kong culture or the culture in Taiwan. I met Chinese people from every province, every region of China, and I got to taste the food. And China's a huge country. It's even bigger than the United States. And so there is so much diversity and so much culture within this one country. So serving stateside, I got to learn about the different accents, learn how to say different phrases in multiple dialects, try the different foods, learn more about their traditions, all the tourist sites in China, and then gain friends who are from all these different regions. And so that was a really incredible experience. And I think I got the most access you could to mainland China that is possible to any missionary. And so in Flushing, where I spent most of my time, we just had Chinese people all around us. All the storefronts are in Chinese. Even the public library is mostly written in, everything's written in Chinese inside with English translations, which is pretty fascinating. And I loved it there so much. And I got to take my family back there. That's one of the other perks about serving stateside is you can go back to your mission so easily. And so I got to take my family back there just last week, actually, and my parents were in shock. Like, whoa, like you served in this? And they couldn't understand what was going on around them. And so it's a very authentic experience, and you have a lot of opportunities to learn the language. You do have to be proactive at times because the missionaries around you speak English, and a lot of times you'll work with English and Spanish-speaking missionaries. And a lot of people will be able to speak English or are trying to learn English. So you have to be more proactive maybe than missionaries in other countries where the people don't speak any English. But at the same time, you have the opportunity to learn whatever foreign language you're called to speak to its fullest capacity. And so that was a really special experience. I was called originally Mandarin Chinese speaking, but throughout my mission, I'd heard there were a few missionaries who would go English speaking, and I know that happens in a lot of missions, especially stateside. And it was something that I just felt it was going to happen eventually, and it did. At about my 16-month mark, I was transferred to an English area where there were no Chinese people, and that ended up really making that was a turning point in my mission. And I feel like it was at that time where I really became a missionary, which is really interesting because I was called Chinese speaking and I felt like that's what I was supposed to do, but I didn't really feel the fullness of the gospel working in my life, or like I was having a complete mission experience until I was really in the English area with the people I served around and my companions who I never would have been with had I not served English speaking. And so I think that's a concern that missionaries do have when they go into an area. But I have a testimony that God is guiding each mission and that He is so aware of what every one of us needs. And me going English speaking was exactly what I needed. And it did not impact my Chinese that greatly. And now that I'm back home, I can take Chinese classes and I'm loving it. And so I think that's a worry that we shouldn't have if we put our faith into God and His plan. So Chinese people will always brag that they have 5,000 years of history. And that's like all the little kids know it. Everybody from China knows that their history is the longest and they are so proud of it. And so much of the whole world's cultures and inventions developed off of Chinese culture. So they're very proud of their history and their heritage. And also, because of that, they have a lot of superstitions and little beliefs and traditions that really don't make sense, but they really stick to it because tradition's a big part of Chinese culture. And so some interesting ones that you will probably need to watch out for or keep in mind when you're going out there is, one is that you take your shoes off whenever you go into someone's home, or at least always ask. There are a few people who have been Americanized or whatnot who aren't so concerned about it, but 90% of the time you'll want to take your shoes off. And I would highly recommend getting slip-on shoes if you're a Chinese missionary. I had a pair of lace-ups and a pair of slip-ons, and eventually I just started wearing my slip-ons all the time because I just didn't want to tie my laces everywhere I went. And so I would highly recommend doing that. Also, Chinese people's eating habits are a lot different from traditional American etiquette. And so I kind of joke that when you go to a Chinese DA, you just take everything your mom taught you and you throw it out the window. Chinese people are just such skilled cooks that they can have 4 different dishes going on at once. They're over at the stove with all 4 burners working and going at work, and they just throw the plates onto the table and suddenly it's filled with all these different dishes. And so everybody who's at the dinner will get a little rice bowl and chopsticks, and from there you just kind of take your chopsticks and pick out whatever you want, and none of the like dishing out your own portions. It's just as you want it, you take it and put it with your rice and hold it up to your mouth and just kind of shovel it in. And so for those who can't figure out how to pick up rice with chopsticks, you actually don't. You just scoop it into your mouth, and you don't put your napkin on your lap. You keep it on the table, and usually we'll discard any bones or anything like that onto the napkin. And they also cut their meat a lot differently. I mean, you'll have a whole fish with the head, the bone, the skin, everything, and you pick at it with your chopsticks. The fish actually has a funny tradition because they'll serve it, and since it has the bones inside, so the skeleton and everything, you eat one side, pick all the meat off one side, but then you have to flip the fish to get all the other meat. And a Chinese tradition is that when you flip the fish, you can do it if you're on land, but if you're on a boat, you're not supposed to flip the fish, because the legend is that if you flip the fish, then the boat will flip with it. Those are a lot of need to knows. I suppose one last one is just Chinese people are very committed to their family members, And I think that's Americans definitely stereotype that. They say that Chinese believe in that family honor that you hear about in Mulan and all those other movies that are set in China. But it's a legitimate thing. And the parents really have high expectations for their children. And they're very hard workers. And especially in New York, where a lot of them come and are immigrants, they go from being doctors in China or professors to working in a restaurant or working as a truck driver. And in some cases, a truck driver is actually considered one of the nicer jobs. And it's fascinating to see that these Chinese people will come here and they'll go into these lines of work and they will work 6 days a week for 12 hours a day. And that's something about the working and living in New York for a lot of immigrant families, is that they work 70 to 80 hour weeks, and they also have travel time built into that. A lot of times they go to either Long Island or upstate, and it takes a while to get there, and they'll only get 1 day off a week, and it's usually a Tuesday or a Wednesday. It's tough because Sunday is one of the busiest days for any business, and so it's really hard to get Sundays off for these Chinese immigrants. But they're such incredible, dedicated people. At the same time, when they commit to something, they really they commit to it. And so I do love that aspect of the Chinese culture, is just how much respect they have for one another and how much they're willing to do. And work to achieve whatever they set out to do. So it's an incredible culture. One of our main methods of finding in New York, because there's so many people, is just street contacting. And that was my favorite way, because I love talking to people and I love finding about their stories and hearing how they came to America, or even where they're from, what their native countries are like. Because coming to the New York South Mission, you really are just going on a mission clear around the world. And you can hop into any country you want. But one day I was out with some missionaries. Me and my companion went with a group of missionaries, and we were handing out flyers for English class. And there was one man who came up to me, and he looks at me in the eye and he says, "What are you doing?" And he says all this in Chinese. But I say, "Well, I'm inviting people to English class and also to come to our church, actually, if you'd want to." He says, "Oh, a church?" I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "What church?" So I tell him, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." He says, "Is your church true?" I'm like, "Well, yes, it is, actually. You want to learn more?" And he's like, "Because I'm looking for a true church. And there are so many Christian churches out here, and I can't tell what one is true, but I want to learn about it." I'm like, "Well, great. We'd love to talk to you. Can we get your information? What's your name?" But in the moment, he was a little abrasive, just kind of like in my face, saying like, da 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 da. He even asked me if we read the correct Bible. And I was like, "I don't know what the correct Bible is, but I'm sure the one, like, I don't know what in your paradigm what that is, but yes, we read the correct Bible." And he just kept asking these questions to just feel it out and see if we worship Jesus Christ, if we read the Bible, da 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 da. And so by the end of the conversation, I just told him, "I can't answer all your questions, and we'll take your information and we'll meet with you. And you can come to our church on Sunday and check it out." And so he said, "All right." So he gave me his name. His English name was Stephen. A lot of Chinese people in the United States have English names, which makes it easy. And so he tells me his name is Stephen Wong, and then gives me his number, and that he'll be there on Sunday. And if he can't make it to church, then he said he'd come afterwards to meet with us. So Sunday rolls around, and we go to church. No Stephen. And church ends, and he's still not there. And we had set up for right after church as kind of a backup plan. And so I called him, and he answers, and he's like, "I'm on my way." And so I say, "Oh, great. We're excited for you to come." And about 20 minutes pass, and he's not there yet. And so me and my companion are kind of worried. We're thinking, all right, he said he was coming. And so we called him back, and he says, "I am in a different church." He got the address mixed up and went to a church 1 block away. And he says, "I'm in a church talking with the pastor right now, and he says that you're Mormon. And he says that you're not a Christian church." And I'm like, yes, we are. Like, we're not just Mormon, we're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he's like, are you really Christian? I'm like, yes, we are. You really worship Jesus Christ? And he says, yes, come over now and find out. And he says, okay, well, this pastor obviously doesn't like you guys, but I have to find a true church, and I cannot discount yours before at least checking it out. So he came and he just kind of barged into the church and said, all right, now tell me what your church is all about. I'm like, all right, well, let's go upstairs and sit down. And he was just so belligerent and was like, I don't believe it. Like, I don't know if this is right. And we say, yes, it is. And we say, can we say a prayer with you? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, well then we'll can we please? And he says, I don't know who you pray to. And we're like, we pray to our Heavenly Father through Jesus Christ. And he's like, and we asked him, have you ever prayed before? He says, no. I'm like, well, let's teach you. It was like, I want to see what your church is about first before praying. And so it just was off to a really rough start. And we were trying to get this guy to calm down, and he just would not. But we kind of start going through the first lesson, and he just keeps asking us, where does your church come from? Where does it start? And we wanted to explain the whole background, as lesson 1 set up, of how Jesus Christ started a church, fell away, and whatnot. But we plow through that, and he looks at his watch, and he says, I need to leave, and I'm just done. And we're like, no, you need to stay, and we're going to show you this movie. And he's like, I don't have time for this. And I say, it's only 20 minutes. And so he looks at his watch and says, okay, I can do that. And so that was the restoration video. So me and my companion flew down the staircase faster than we ever have, and ran back upstairs with the TV, threw it on the table, plugged it in, put the DVD in. It was so fast. I think we did it in like 20 seconds. It was incredible. And just the moment the movie started, his whole, like all the barriers, all the walls that he had put up, just, you could feel them melt away. And he just watched and didn't say a word the whole time. And at the end of the movie, he just kind of pauses and says, that makes sense. And me and my companion look at each other and we're like, well, great. Like, let's tell you a little bit more. And he calmed down significantly. And we talked to him about the Book of Mormon. I ran into another hitch when we found out he was only willing to read traditional characters, and we only had simplified character Book of Mormons, so he wouldn't even accept a Book of Mormon on the first lesson, but he did say a prayer with us at the end. And we gave him a pamphlet that was in traditional characters, and he left. And me and my companion looked at each other, and we just said, he asked such good questions, and he's looking for truth, but he's not going to get along with any of these members. And long story short, we kept meeting with Stephen, and he just transformed. He came to church the next Sunday and was a completely different person, and was one of the goofiest, nicest guys that I was able to teach in my whole mission. And he was baptized a month later, and now he has the Melchizedek priesthood, and he's serving as a Sunday school teacher. And he is a totally different person because of the gospel. And no matter what country people come from, they do have the light of Christ, and they want that truth. They want to find happiness. And Stephen is the perfect example of someone who let the gospel into his life and changed completely because of it. And he's one of my best friends. And so I'm really grateful for God leading us to him. The New York South Mission is, well, I'm of course biased, but it is the most incredible and diverse mission that you could go to. And I am so grateful to have served in a place where I was exposed to just so many different people. There are 9 million people in the New York South Mission boundaries. And so you will have a chance to get a taste of so many different stories and cultures, and literally taste so many different kinds of foods. And so it is something to be so excited about, because you develop so many rich relationships and experiences in this city that everyone around the world dreams of going to. New York is the city that no matter where you live, you've heard of it. And as a missionary, I was so grateful to be able to go there and experience it from that perspective, the way that a lot of people never get to see. And so it's really a blessed place. And the church is growing there so well right now. There was a new stake created in the mission just recently in April 2014. And that really set off the fire. And it is just growing so well. And the members loved the missionaries. And the wards I served in were so diverse. I served in a ward in Staten Island that probably had 30 different countries represented. And I loved it. And I'm sure any missionary that goes to New York South, if you simply go into it ready to embrace whatever culture you see, whatever culture you're exposed to, and just learn to love talking to everyone you meet, you are going to have the time of your life. And you are going to develop such a love for every and any kind of person that there is to meet on this planet. And so my advice is really to just be excited. And it's going to be a surprise because every missionary's experience there is going to be completely different because there is so much diversity. And so be ready to craft your own adventure. And as you put your trust in God and His plan, you will look back and you'll realize how inspired every step of your mission was. And you'll just can't help but have an incredible sense of gratitude. And that's definitely what I feel even right now talking about it.